And before I ask you anything, I just want to say congratulations on this movie, Mr. Burton. I watched it about a week ago and I loved it. It's really stuck with me since then. So congratulations, because it turned out really great.
Thank you. It's a surprisingly dark film, isn't it? You think it's going to be a benign kind of teacher pupil story, and it has something much darker going on, I think, underneath it, and I think that takes people by surprise in the film a bit.
Oh, totally, totally. I mean, I knew a little bit about Richard Burton, but I love just kind of the act of learning about him through this movie, but then kind of exploring where the actual script takes you. I thought it was just really well done, kind of how it presents all the information.
Excellent, excellent.
So I'd love to start just by asking what it or how it was that you got involved with this project. Like, what's the story of how you got cast in Mr. Burton, and what was it that really made you want to be part of this movie?
So Mark Evans, the director, approached me maybe 6 years ago, and he said, "We've got this movie, a very Welsh movie." Uh, he spent, he spent his life directing specifically Welsh stories, and he approached me to play the part. I think at that point he didn't realize I wasn't Welsh, even though my name is Jones. Uh, and I read the script and I really liked it, but I was fingers crossed whether it could be made because it's such a delicate, uh, small story, which doesn't mean doesn't have big implications, but it's the kind of biopic where you hope that they'll find a way to get it made. And over 6 years they did, and uh, I stuck with it, and yeah, I mean, what can I say? It was great, and then there was a hunt for who was going to play Richard Jenkins, which is no, I mean, as lot of the time waited was about trying to find a young actor or an actor who could seem that young to
Mm.
play that part, which is which is not obvious because obviously for people of that generation, they don't really know who Richard Jenkins Burton was. They don't really. I grew up with Burton as a massive part of my life, not because I'd seen him on stage, but just because I've seen him on screen, but also on celebrity pages of things. And he was such a sort of overwhelming figure. But nowadays, people just haven't even heard of him. It's an extraordinary thing. So to find a young actor who could then get into that persona and understand the power of that voice and understand the impact of that personality, that's what took the time. And so I was sort of, as the years went by, I was hoping that how because certain actors got too old, and then it's just that usual thing of trying to hunt down the right person at the right time.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And you touched on something that I want to ask you about too, because a movie like this, Mr. Burton, can just feel like such a gift. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I love the big blockbusters, I love the superhero movies, but I'm also like well aware that a smaller budget biopic like this can be hard to get made, like in a world where like IP kind of dominates everything. And the fact that it's coming out like around now is pretty awesome too, because I feel like movies like this tend to just be released through like October to January for award season, and then there's like a dry spell for 8 months where we don't get these kind of films. So
True.
how exciting was it for you to be like part of a project like this that's coming out now? And what do you ultimately like hope people get out of watching Mr. Burton?
Well, here's the thing, Brandon. As an actor, I'm interested in acting in the best material I can find, or the best material that gets offered to me. Really, I'm kind of selfish in that way. You hope of course, you want it to go and find an audience. You don't, but in a way, my enjoyment comes through just making the film. Um, and I think at times with these smaller movies, they can sometimes just disappear because, as you say, the noise created by bigger marketing budgets, by bigger mean that things get swamped. So it becomes very important how and when you release these things. Obviously, it was released here to coincide with Richard Burton's 100th birthday. So it was part of a series of things that were celebrating that. So that was fortuitous. Well, it wasn't fortuitous. It was sort of quite deliberately done. Um, I think it's a shame personally that films all get bunched up together in the way. It didn't used to be like that, and that everything becomes about awards because awards are another sort of in a way of celebrate, the marketing of film. So they all bunch up like that. So yeah, I think it's great. It's getting released in America. I hope it finds its audience. I hope. If not immediately, if it gradually gets discovered as people hear about it, and word of mouth. That's what I hope.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I watched it about a week ago and I've been telling people I know, like this one you're gonna want to check out. Like this is a good one. So yeah.
Good, good.
So you're obviously playing Mr. Philip Burton in this movie, and he's such an interesting, inspiring character. I mean, obviously this is all based on real life. Both Philip and Richard Burton were real people, but what kind of excited you the most about getting to portray this character? Like when you read the script for the first time, was there an aspect of him that really like jumped out to you and made you really excited to explore in your performance?
Uh, I think it's easy to think when one has seen this film and the events of this film that, and indeed when one watches the film from start to end, that you're dealing with a man who lives a slightly, there's a pathos about him because he lives a solitary life, and his sexuality seems unfulfilled, and he seems like, in some way, rich by the end of the film. Spoiler alert, but his relationship, his adoption of Richard Jenkins, and Richard Jenkins' subsequent um, ascendancy, that he might be left behind. And what's extraordinary is that when one reads about Philip Burton, he went on to form a drama school in the States, in New York, which is still there, and he set that up, the drama school. And then he accompanied Burton throughout the rest of his life and was friends with Burton and Taylor, and also was a sort of counselor and advisor, and was often in rehearsals throughout Burton's career, and obviously outlived Richard Burton, who died tragically young, but also came out successfully in Florida and lived in Florida, and had a very happy, fulfilled, long life. And that, I think, is kind of, I found that very intriguing. So when I came to play the part, I wanted to suggest that there was nothing pathetic about this man, that his love of literature, his love of acting, and his love of teaching, these three passions that he had, nourished and fueled his view of the world at large. And I think that that's what I loved about the film, in a way, is that it's easy to write him off as a tragic character to begin with, because he's a lonely man living in an apparently lonely man living in a boarding house. But actually, he has this huge emotional landscape within him that we discover through the film, and that, would be in a subsequent, which happened in his subsequent biography as well. And so, in many ways, that what happened to him later fueled my understanding of him at the beginning of this film.
Sure, totally. No, that makes total sense. And it jumps into my next question too, because obviously talking to you, it sounds like you know a lot about Richard Burton and Philip Burton, just kind of who they were. But like, was there anything that you felt like you learned during make the process of making this movie, like about Richard Burton, whether it's like something factual or just like a perspective or an aspect of his life that you kind of didn't fully realize before? Did you come away from this experience like feeling like you knew more about who Richard Burton was?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's something about what happens in this film. This it's sort of unimaginable nowadays, this idea of what happens in terms of what Philip Burton does for Richard Burton. Yes, he's an inspirational teacher, and some of us are lucky enough to have inspirational teachers. But again, spoiler alert, but the relationship that they have and how it develops, it you can't quite believe that this was the origin of our story of Richard Burton. That this all it's like out of a novel. This relationship, this exchange and bargain that happens between the two fathers that Richard Jenkins has. It feels like this must belong to a 19th century Thomas Hardy novel or something because it feels incredible. And I certainly didn't know anything about that. And also this his that he had so many brothers and sisters that his sister effectively became his mother. I didn't know anything about that. And the sheer contrast of what we now know about Burton and the astronomical wealth that he earned in his lifetime compared to the abject poverty, by which I don't mean sadness, because I think he had a very happy childhood, but the poverty that he lived in. That contrast, I didn't really understand the sheer scale of that, and that feels very much of its time. Um, and it's very close to my heart. My father was an actor, and he came from a mining town in the 1950s and became an actor. And like that, and those stories, those sort of very British stories of social mobility through acting, you don't hear about them quite as much now as you used to. And I think it's of interest to people to see how acting and the arts used to be a passage out of economic uh, instability.